Welcome to Relish Books. Today I am talking about Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. This book is so long, so massive, such a huge cast of characters, of relationships, personalities, and developments of the West, of a million different things. The book is so long and there's so much to it that I know that if I try to talk about it too much, the video will be way too long. So it's a very long book, but I'm going to try to make it a very short video. This book is almost 900 pages long, and yet it feels like it just draws you through it like nothing. I took a break from the book about halfway through, but when I was actually reading it, I read the second half in just a few days, less than a week. It pulled me in so strongly. Again, I'm going to try to just hit a few of the highlights. Other people have talked about this book so much. If you want a better done and more in-depth talk about this book, you need to go listen to somebody else. But my thoughts, it is genuinely some of the best writing I've ever experienced in my life. Larry McMurtry is fantastic. Not just in his plot, not just in his characters, although he has some of the most interesting and various people you will ever meet anywhere. The directness of his writing, the leanness of it, there's nothing extra. He cuts directly to the heart of whatever matter is at hand in a way that makes your mind just completely turn around. You feel there with the characters, you're relating to them, you're understanding them, you're tracking with them, and yet he can also switch it up and make you see things from a whole new perspective in an instant with one brilliantly timed, striking sentence. He is incredible. This has been called the greatest Western novel of all time, and even though I haven't read every Western, I think I can easily agree with that. It is absolutely stunning. Again, not really going to talk about any of the characters too much because I feel like I would just get into it too much. There's so much going on there. But it's a story about a journey, both a literal one and the journey that all the characters take emotionally in their character development and who they are. It's a bunch of cowboys in the West, these rangers, these older men. I love that the book is not this romantic tale of like young hero cowboys. It's these older men who are the heroes of the story, the main guys, these older rangers towards the end of their lives. The whole book has a tone of being the end of something. And they're making this drive, this cattle drive from Texas to Montana. And everything that happens along the way, no matter what happens, the next thing that happens is still unexpected. There is so much, so many difficulties, obviously, so much death. That's not a giveaway at all to say that a lot of people die by the end of the book. You know, it's a very wide cast, but by the end of the book, it's slimmed down considerably. I loved his brutality in a way. It really added to the realism of it, how you could have these characters who have chapter perspectives, like they get chapters from their perspective for a long time, and yet they'll just suddenly die, and not necessarily dramatically, not necessarily with any great final stand or fanfare. Sometimes people just die, and that just it was shocking, but it was real. And that's the way I would describe the whole book. I love his blending of, in a lot of Westerns, we see either like the sappy, like romantic stereotype of the West, you know, with the hero and the girl, or we see just a completely violent, brutal side of it. And Larry McMurtry beautifully blends in perfect harmony the glorious romance of the West with the intense brutality and harshness of it. And it feels, like I said, it's like a perfect balance. You feel the horror of a lot of the events that happen, along with the beauty of the wilderness, the beauty of this country. just incredible, amazing. Yeah, I loved the characters. I loved seeing them develop. I wouldn't say anybody, not a single person in this whole book, is really a good person, like a solidly, morally good person, but they all feel real. And I'm not usually into books that are morally gray, and I wouldn't call this book morally gray. It's just about people who a lot of them are trying to be a certain way or think they should be a certain way, and they're not. A lot of them know that they're not doing right, and a lot of them don't really give a lot of thought to morality. They're just living the way that everybody around them lives. I think the book is amazing. I think it's incredible. I am so glad that I read it. I really, really deeply appreciate it, but I'm not just going to recommend it without any kind of caveat, because it is one of the most harsh things I've ever read. There's some violence that is some of the most graphic I've experienced, but that didn't bother me as much as the time period and the people that you're with. Live a very crude kind of lifestyle. Most of the women in the story, most of the women that these cowboys ever even come in contact with, are prostitutes. These guys are sailors, essentially. The way that we think about sailors really applies to these, or from old times, really applies to these cowboys. They spend their months out on the plains, they come into town, and they go straight to the saloons where they drink and then buy women. And most of the female characters in the book are prostitutes, but they're not just, some of them are like kind of the stereotype of that you see in westerns sometimes, of that kind of person, but a lot of them, or several of them, the ones that really come into the story, are more complex, and mostly you just feel the tragedy of the situations more than anything else. Lorena is kind of the main female character, and again, I didn't want to specifically talk too much about all the people in the story because it's too much to fit into a video. But the way that you perceive her as a person really shifts throughout the book, and the overall sense that you feel for her is just one of, you just feel sorry for her. You just feel terrible because she's had a really, really awful life for the most part. And yeah, none of these people are just one way. None of them are just a good person or just a bad person. They're all complex. They are all deeper. Well, not all of them are deep characters, I guess. But even then, they're interesting. Like Jake Spoon is a very shallow person, and yet even he has a lot of interest. So I think the author is just incredible in being able to pull off realistically such a variety of characters, of people that you love, even if they're bad, of people that you hate, even if they're not so bad. All kinds. This book contains a huge, huge range of emotion, of people, of events. Just an incredible story. There's so many themes you could dive into that he pulls off. I don't know how he managed to pull off such a vast piece of work and have it all flow together so perfectly. It's incredible. It's just a small thing, but I thought I would mention it because all the main themes have probably already been talked about so much. I love the theme with Captain Call, who was one of my favorite characters, interestingly. I just really related to him somehow. I don't know how, but I thought he was such an interesting character, and I really felt for him more than anyone else, I think. And I loved this kind of small plot line that had to do with names. He won't ever, a large part of the story is how he won't acknowledge that Newt is his son. And until near the end of the book, he won't ever call Newt by his name. And he wouldn't ever call Newt's mother by her name. And most of the time he just doesn't call women by their names in general. This idea of a name and a person's identity and a person's right to be called by their name, to be defined by who they are rather than their circumstances. And but I felt like his character was so perfectly summed up in the line where he says that his horse means more to him than his name. I thought that was a perfect summary of who he is as a person at that point in the book. And of course, the captain does have an extra special love for his horse that makes it more meaningful. But yeah, I thought it was a brilliant, brilliant summary of who he is. If you had to define the captain's character in one phrase, I think that part where he says that his horse means more to him than his name defines him. Anyway, he was the most interesting character to me, but the book is rich in characters, rich in description, in language, in in everything. But again, very brutal, very blunt. Normally I don't read this kind of content, but for me, I'm never just like, oh, because a book has this in it, I'm just not going to read it. For me, it's about how it's approached, why it's in the story. Larry McMurtry approaches everything with an incredible bluntness. He's incredibly direct. So you see everything, or pretty much everything. Like, you know what's going on, you see it. He's direct about it, he's blunt about it, to the point of being crude a lot of the time. But even though, yes, there's a lot of bad stuff, I think the point is to be stark, to be transparent, to let you know what this was like. And so I read it, and there's also no sensuousness in it. That's never the purpose of why he's writing it. It's not supposed to be for any kind of pleasure in the graphic bits. It's just, he's just being blunt. And so yeah, there was way more of it than there needed to be, even to tell a story. I didn't appreciate how much of it there was. He could easily have told the story, been direct and blunt without putting in quite as much as he did. So I do have a bit of a problem with that. But again, there's no sensuousness in it. It's just, he's just very blunt about the way that these people are living. So there is that. A lot of language, a lot of violence, but an incredible, incredible story. So for what it's worth, those are my thoughts on Lonesome Dove. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.